It's been 9 years since the iPad mini was announced, and at the time it was an awesome idea for a product, everything iPad. And remember, in 2012, the iPad was at its absolute peak of hype, of adoption, because it was still a very new product. But it's been 9 years, and the thing, even though this is a 5th generation, still looks exactly the same as it did when it was first launched. New generations, new guts, new bones, but finally, we have an all-new iPad mini. Oh, and a brand new entry-level 9th generation iPad 2. So I feel like Apple have really made the clear decision to separate their Pro lineup of iPads from all the others, because we didn't see any new Pro announcement. Maybe that'll come later in the year, or maybe early next year. We started off with this. This is the 9th generation iPad. Now, there's not a lot to say about this device. It's pretty much the same thing with new guts, and that's what Apple do well. They keep their products fresh. But if we have a look at this, and I'm looking here for the first time, I'm pretty confident that this is going to look, feel, and drive the same as that, except with a bit more guts, because it's got the latest processor available at this lower end. But as you can see, not a lot of change. The point here is they're updating that entry level. So at $499, you're still getting a modern, fresh, new iPad for those people that are updating from their iPad 2 or 3rd generation or 4th generation, because that's how long we're holding on to iPads now. So let's look at what the iPad lineup is today. It's kind of fascinating because you actually see a bit of evolution here. You've got your iPad mini in size-wise, and then you've got your 9th generation. Those two still looking very similar in the lineup until now. Then you've got your iPad Air, which adopts that square look of this iPad Pro, and then your 2 different iPad Pro sizes. And that's where it's interesting that the iPad mini really steps into that Air Pro mode. Rather than retaining its spot as a very much entry-level device, even though it was always more expensive than the entry-level iPad, they've adopted the new look and shape. And here it is, right here, the new iPad mini. Square edges, gorgeous design, and really a modern, fresh look for the iPad mini. Critically, down the bottom, USB-C connection. And that was the first thing that caught my kids out here. They use Apple Pencils, and the old Apple Pencil, the original Apple Pencil, doesn't pair because it needs the Lightning connection. 2nd generation Apple Pencil required, and the great news is that magnetically attaches to this iPad mini as it does onto other 2nd generation Apple Pencil devices. Now, this isn't all the colors, but it's a bit of a sample so that you can see the different shades. You've got your space gray, you've got your, I think they're calling this something special, and you've got your purple. Now, it's a good look, it's a fresh look, a large camera bump, fresh square edges, and critically, Touch ID. Now, the Touch ID here is exactly the same as you'll find on the iPad Air. First introduced, that's the first time Apple had the Touch ID on a physical power button like that. And it was expected that would come with perhaps the iPhone 13. Given COVID and masks and the like, I thought Touch ID would be a much better solution. But it didn't, but it's here on the Mini. So Touch ID on the top, and then your 2 volume connections. My kids have been playing with these, and I can tell you their feedback was very simple. The Touch ID, it's great that when you go to power it on, it actually shows you in the corner where the Touch ID button is, because when you look at it, you don't quite know the orientation. So it gives you a little indication of where you need to put your finger to turn on the device. But here's what's really fascinating. When I said to the kids, you know, what's your feedback? How's it looking? Their feedback was, well, actually, all the games don't take up the whole screen. So let's have a look. So it's kind of a strange thing that there's a little bit, it's 4 or 5 millimeters of space between the edge of the screen, the 8.3 inch screen, and the actual game. Now, I'm going to say that's a screen orientation resolution issue that is new to developers, so they just simply need to update their apps to account for it. But the kids said pretty much every game has those black borders. They didn't care, not a problem, but I found it a fascinating observation from them, that it's essentially real estate that's not used. Look at the edge of the screen here, and as we swipe up and go home, you'll see it goes all the way to the edge. So that's your full screen experience there. That's the amount of screen real estate you should have. And of course, now we've got the swipe gestures that come with iOS 15 across all devices that are compatible. You can see those edge borders. But all in all, this is a full iPad experience. You've got to remember, this is now rocking the A15 Bionic chip, the same chip in the iPhone 13. So this is actually potentially more powerful than the iPad Pro. This is essentially a mini Pro. I got to tell you, that's impressive. And it does show in the price too. The iPad mini used to be a $500 odd item. It was, kind of $100 more than the standard iPad that you could get. Now the iPad mini starts at $749 for the lowest spec configuration with Wi-Fi only. So it's a little bit more expensive in that sense, but you are getting a fully updated device as opposed to just new guts and glory. I am very impressed with it. I've always thought the iPad was a great device because it was very holdable, very one-hand holdable. These are very popular, not just with kids and families, but places like law enforcement, they use these as their kind of interaction devices when they're actually at work. Enterprises, industry, this is actually a really useful device. So I can see a lot of new accessories coming out for it. And I can see it being very popular as an upgrade for a lot of families that are looking to upgrade their old iPad and give something a bit better. I always think that, frankly, if you're fortunate enough, and it's a first world kind of entitlement to have the money to get an iPad for each kid, the iPad mini is the way to go because it's a very personal device. But if kids are sharing, then the larger iPad, the standard iPad, is a better option because it can be sat back and they can all watch the same kind of Netflix or Stan show streamed, or movies that are on the iPad, as opposed to it being a kind of smaller personal device. The new iPad mini. I'm going to call it the Mini Pro. $749 on sale this Friday, and well worth checking out. Well worth the upgrade if you're in the market.